you were kind of the primary suspect in this homicide
I still
investigation. You still are. What are your thoughts about that, and what are your emotions right now? What's kind of going through your head?
It's very stressful, but I hope they will be found, and I hope we can move forward from this.
Robert Leeming had a face that looked friendly and a body that wouldn't stay still. At first look, he seemed harmless, but as soon as you learn more about that interview, you'll see that he's not innocent at all. From May to June 2019, his live-in girlfriend and their young child were last seen. Investigators were working hard to find the truth, while Robert was out doing interviews. What they found next will make you question everything you thought you knew. Because the details were so shocking and cruel, people called him Canada's Chris Watts, and you'll understand why by the end of this movie. Let's go back to 2017 to get into this story more deeply. In that year, Jasmine Lovett and Robbie Sanderson had their first child, a girl named Aaliyah Sanderson. There was a time when Jasmine and Robbie were both pretty young and not married. People who knew Jasmine said she was stunningly beautiful. She was in her early 20s. However, things were not as great as they seemed on the outside, as occurs in many relationships. The bond between Jasmine and Robbie began to fall apart after Aaliyah was born. Several news sources say that Robbie started coming home later and later, leaving Jasmine to care for their baby alone. Now things are worse because he starts showing up high or drunk. Robbie quickly turned more hostile as his behavior got worse. When Robbie got home one day, he quickly made things worse by yelling at Jasmine for money. She ran into the bathroom to call the police because she was scared for her safety. Robbie had already left by the time the police came, and since Jasmine wasn't hurt, they told her there wasn't much they could do. It took 13 days for the order to be lifted after Jasmine and Robbie said they had worked things out. But Jasmine was able to get an emergency protection order against Robbie. They told the police that they didn't need the order anymore, but it's still not clear what exactly they said to each other at that time. We know for sure that Jasmine and Robbie broke up in the end, and Jasmine took care of Aaliyah. After they broke up, Jasmine and Robbie were able to get along pretty well. They worked on being good co-parents and did their best to keep their daughter's home peaceful, even though they had problems in the past. Remember that this all happened in 2018, and during her mental turmoil, Jasmine turned to her close family for comfort. News stories say that Jasmine was very close to her mum and sister. They got together for family dinners a lot, and she told them about everything going on in her life. Jasmine thought it was time to start putting herself out there again after months of heartbreak. She signed up for a few dating sites in the hopes of meeting someone new. She didn't have to wait long to meet Robert Leeming, a guy who seemed to meet her high standards. In the middle of her 20s, Jasmine was only a few years younger than Robert, who was 34 years old at the time. There wasn't a big age difference, but it was still clear. Robert was born in the UK, but had moved around a lot as a child because his father was in the service. Moving around a lot made it hard for him to make friends that would last, and this problem stayed with him into adulthood. Robert had a hard time making friends, but he found a way to connect with people online, where he felt more at ease. He loved meeting new people and chatting in online groups without having to deal with the stress of meeting them in person. In fact, he met his first wife in one of these chat rooms. She was Canadian and was learning to become a teacher. Robert moved to Canada to be with her after they got married in 2013. They had a kid together, but the marriage didn't last, and by 2017, they were no longer together. Robert's ex-wife got full custody of their son, and Robert could only visit him under supervision. Robert stayed in Canada, even though he and his ex-wife were no longer together because he had permanent residency from his job as a heavy goods truck mechanic. Like Jasmine, Robert used dating sites to meet new people after his marriage ended. He dated a few women before he met Jasmine. When they first met in September 2018, their relationship moved quickly. A month later, Jasmine and her young daughter Aaliyah moved in with Robert. People looked at her funny when she took that big of a step with a child around. Most people would say that moving in together after only 1 month of dating is quick, but for them, it made sense at the time. In terms of money, it made sense. Sharing a house cut costs in half, which is something that many people can respect these days. When you live with a partner, instead of a flatmate, you share the rent. But there's also someone to help with chores, food, and in Jasmine's case, childcare. Since Jasmine didn't have a job at the time, she counted on child support from her ex-boyfriend to raise Aaliyah. They must have been glad when Robert stepped in to help with Aaliyah, and he did. Robert was happy to help out, whether it was getting things cleaned up, cooking, or watching Aaliyah while Jasmine ran chores. He seemed to be loving his new job very much. Aaliyah knew he loved her because he treated her like his own child. That was the most important thing for Jasmine. Things looked great from the outside. This is what Jasmine's family also thought. She stayed close to her mother and sister Genevieve, and the three of them often got together for dinner. Robert started coming to these events, and her family was happy to have him. He seemed nice, interested, and truly concerned about Jasmine and Aaliyah. However, not everyone agreed with it. Though Genevieve was always looking out for her sister, she couldn't get rid of her unease. She didn't like how quickly things were moving in their relationship. And even though it was clear that Robert cared about Aaliyah and Jasmine, Genevieve couldn't shake the thought that something wasn't quite right. Then there was April 14th, 2019. A normal family dinner. Aaliyah, Robert, and Jasmine joined the normal group, but something wasn't right this time. Genevieve couldn't help but notice that Jasmine and Robert seemed a little more distant and quiet than normal. It was barely there, but it was enough to make her think. Anyhow, the dinner was over without a hitch, and the sisters even agreed to get together again on April 19th, Good Friday. But when the day came, Jasmine didn't show up. She didn't call, text, or do anything else. This was so not like them at all. Jasmine always did what she said she would do, especially when it came to family. Every call and text that Genevieve didn't get was adding to her stress. She even tried to send Jasmine a message on Facebook, but her messages were not only ignored, they were marked as not arrived. Because she couldn't get rid of her worry, Genevieve drove over to Jasmine and Robert's house that night around 5 p.m. There had to be someone home because the basement light was on. She rang the bell. Nothing. The doorbell was rung, but nothing came. She knocked again, waited, and even tried to sneak a peek inside, but the house was strangely quiet. Genevieve left her sister because she couldn't reach her and hoped she was overthinking things. On April 21st, 2 days later, Jasmine's mom, Kim, chose to go to the house herself. Like Genevieve, she was met with quiet. She tried to knock and ring the doorbell, but it didn't work. Kim was getting ready to leave when she saw two strange pairs of trainers by the front door. One pair had just been cleaned and was still very wet when it was put carefully by the door. Her mother left a note on the front door of Jasmine and Robert's house, but she hadn't heard back. It was probably a message telling them to get in touch with either Jasmine or Robert so that they would finally answer. But days went by, and Jasmine still hadn't said anything. Concern in the family had hit a boiling point by April 23rd, 4 days after the note was left. There were a few times when Jasmine didn't show up for planned events. Today, she was meant to have dinner with her mum and sister. For many years, this dinner had been a tradition for the family, and Jasmine would never miss it. The family held on to a thin thread of hope, even though they were becoming more and more worried. Maybe something had come up, or maybe there was a mistake. But that hope started to fade as the hours went by, and Jasmine still hadn't shown up. For Genevieve, this was the moment when everything changed. She was really scared. Whatever it was, she couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in her gut that told her something was very wrong. She was determined to do everything she could to find her sister. So she went to the police office and filled out a missing persons report. She gave the cops her phone, answered all of their questions, and told them everything she knew about Jasmine's life in the past few months. At first, police thought it was possible that Jasmine had left on her own. But Genevieve quickly brushed off the idea. She would never leave her family, especially not without first calling someone, and she would never leave her young daughter, Aaliyah, behind. Jasmine loved her child and her family very much. It was just not in her nature to disappear without a trace. Investigators also looked at Robbie, Jasmine's ex-boyfriend, to see if he had anything to do with her missing. Genevieve made it clear that Robbie was no longer in Jasmine's life, but he had given Aaliyah parenting rights, which meant he was no longer required to pay child support. Even though this made Jasmine's finances worse, there were no signs that they were still at odds with each other. He wasn't a suspect after cops looked into it more. Once the detectives looked more closely into Jasmine's connection with her current boyfriend Robert, they found something much more complicated than they had first thought. And so, in December 2018, Jasmine told her sister Genevieve about the problems she was having with Robert. They were having a hard time with each other and had even split up. That being said, they chose to keep living together as roommates, even though it was an odd arrangement. Especially since there was a toddler in the house, Jasmine said it was a sensible choice. Not only is moving out with a child hard, it costs a lot of money. She said it was only a short-term fix while they tried to work things out. Following a short time, Jasmine told Genevieve that they were back together and ready to try again with their relationship. But that wasn't the end of the trouble. Another personal information that Jasmine shared with her sister made the situation even more complicated. Although they were apart at the time, she became pregnant. Instead of continuing the pregnancy, Jasmine made the hard choice to end it. It was still hard to understand whether that choice had anything to do with the split, their reconciliation, or something deeper that was hurting their relationship. As time went on, stress about money started to rise. Given that Robbie was no longer paying Aaliyah child support, Jasmine had to take care of herself and her daughter on her own. She was determined to find work, even though she hadn't found one yet. In fact, Jasmine really wanted to go back to work, and not just to make money. She also wanted to feel useful and connect with other adults more. She even said that she was envious every day when Robert went to work and she stayed home to take care of Aaliyah. Now, Genevieve's story made the police sure that this wasn't a case of a lost child. The cops quickly began a full-scale investigation because Jasmine had been through something else. In just a few days, they put together a timeline of what happened before she went missing. As we already said, Jasmine and her daughter Aaliyah were last seen at a family dinner on April 14th, where everything seemed fine. On April 15th, they were caught on camera at a nearby shopping store. As Jasmine paid for her groceries at a self-checkout, Aaliyah sat peacefully in her pram. She looked cool and collected. The first signs of something being wrong started to show up the next day, April 16th. The exact time Robert dropped Aaliyah off at creche was 7:12 in the morning. Things seemed to be going as planned, but at 4:46 p.m., something strange happened. Robert went back to get Aaliyah, but there was a problem. His name wasn't on the list of people who were allowed to pick her up. It wasn't a small thing. Robert had to call Jasmine to get permission from the creche staff to take Aaliyah home. Jasmine then had to do this in person. This was definitely strange, but it wasn't the most scary thing. After that, Jasmine and Aaliyah were never seen or heard from again. Also, I post new cases and true crime stories here every week. If that sounds interesting to you, please think about subscribing. It really does help. Days went by with no sign of them. Then, on April 18th, a strange clue showed up. It was discovered that someone else had used Jasmine's credit card to place an order for food delivery, but the police were not sure if it had been Jasmine herself who did it. But it was clear that the person who used it still had something to do with her. The research had now turned its attention to Robert. He was the last person seen with both Jasmine and Aaliyah after all. Janavi, Jasmine's sister, had already told the police about the problems in her relationship with Robert, including how they broke up and then got back together and how stressed they were. With this new knowledge, Robert became an even more interesting person. It made sense to ask him, especially since their relationship has been going through a lot of trouble lately. So, on April 24th, the cops went to Robert's house to make sure he was okay. The next thing that happened was strange and scary. When the police knocked on the door, no one answered. They kept knocking. It was like playing Groundhog Day over and over again. Knocks, but no answer. After that, the police saw something odd. Some days ago, Jasmine's mum had left a note on the door. It was still there. It was almost like it was ready for them the whole time. But that wasn't the only strange thing about it. Before, the window in front of the front door was clear. Now, something that looked like cellophane, the clear plastic used to wrap gifts, was covering it. It was the only window on the door that was closed, and it made it impossible to see inside. It was impossible to see what was going on inside because of this. The police knocked on the door several times, rang the bell, and then waited. Something was being kept secret, as the mood was tense. While they were waiting, one cop saw a wet trunk liner lying on top of the air conditioner, which looked like it was drying out. The trunk lining looked like it had just been cleaned. Also, the yard hose was unwound, which meant it had been used to clean something, most likely the trunk liner. This made me think right away of the trainers that Jasmine's mom had seen earlier that had been washed and soaked. It looked like there was going to be a cleanup, but what was being kept secret? As they kept looking, they realized something. Someone had been cleaning and moving things around in this house, so it wasn't empty. The only issue was that the cops couldn't get in to check on the people inside. They couldn't get in because the door was locked and the windows were closed. The police didn't want to give up, though. They thought of a better idea and called the fire department. With the help of a ladder truck, they were able to look through the windows on the upper floors in the hopes of seeing something that would help them learn more. They were sorry, but they couldn't see anything through the windows. But as soon as the fire truck pulled up, the lights inside the house flickered on. Robert then opened the front door.
I was sleeping. I sleep with plugs in and... Hey, well, we've been here for hours and hours and hours now, hey? Banging on your door and ringing the doorbell.
Calling your phone.
Yeah. I've been drinking and smoking a lot, so... Okay.
Okay, so she's not with her sister.
What do you mean? Well, that's the reason that we're here.
Why do you think we're here?
Is the family's calling us saying we haven't heard from our daughter and our sister.
makes sense.
Okay, that makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay, why does that make sense?
Because I haven't had it for long.
The police knew they had to look into this further at this point. When they asked Robert about Jasmine's car, he said she didn't drive. That didn't make sense, since she was an adult and should have a way to get around. They also saw the note that Jasmine's mother had left on the door, but Robert said he didn't know about it. Every second that went by, things were getting stranger. The police were becoming more and more suspicious of Robert's actions. He was responding in strange ways, and his story didn't seem to make sense. As they pressed him for more information, it seemed like Robert was either hiding something important or wasn't living in the real world at all. The police wanted to find out what was going on, so they chose to look into Robert's past more. It turned out that Robert had a history of mental abuse in a past relationship. His ex-wife said that he would try to trick her, call her crazy, and hurt her feelings. It looked like Robert's lack of care and emotional abuse were big reasons why they split up. It didn't end there, though. Robert's ex-wife also said that he was getting more and more guns and knives, which scared her so much that she worried about her safety and the safety of their child. The police looked into Robert's past even more and found that his ex-girlfriend had also reported him for mistreating animals. It seems that Robert took the dog they used to have together to a park, tied it to a tree, and left it there without food or water. Luckily, someone saw the dog in the park and took it to the Humane Society. This was a very big red flag. If someone is mean to animals, they are likely to be mean to people too, and Robert's behavior towards animals caused a lot of worry. He was charged with animal abuse and pleaded guilty to 3 counts: making an animal in pain, failing to give an animal food and water, and failing to give an animal a place to stay. He didn't go to jail, but he did get a $5,000 fine and was told he couldn't have any animals for 10 years. There's more bad stuff in Robert's past, though. During the divorce proceedings, Robert's ex-wife found out some very troubling things. On Robert's phone, she found some scary web searches. One was about tying a dog up in a tree, which, knowing his past, should have set off alarm bells. The next search was even worse. It was about a house fire that killed a mother and her kid. Just think about how scared his ex must have been after what he did to the dog. She was afraid he would do something much worse to her and her son. Because they had learned so much scary new about Robert's past, the police chose to take things seriously. He was caught on April 25th in connection with the disappearances of Jasmine and Aaliyah and taken to a quiet room to be questioned. Robert said that the last time he saw Jasmine and Aaliyah was on April 17th when they went on a walk at Bragg Creek, which is about 30 minutes from his house. After that, everyone went back to the house. Robert says that while he got ready for a date, Jasmine watched TV on the couch. Robert had been telling people that he and Jasmine were just roommates at this point. He even said that he had been seeing someone else for a long time. Before Robert went on his date, he said that everything seemed fine with Jasmine. But when he got back that night, Jasmine and Aaliyah were nowhere to be found. This really set off alarm bells for the police, especially since Jasmine's family had told them that Robert and Jasmine were seeing each other again after their split. To get in touch with the woman Robert said he was seeing that night, the police chose to call her Kate. Kate said she had been with Robert on the night Jasmine and Aaliyah went missing when they talked to her. The cops asked Kate some more questions to find out more. She said that she and Robert met online in February 2019, which was about 5 months after Jasmine and Aaliyah moved in with him. They had gone on a few dates together, and Robert would sometimes stay at Kate's house. Even though it didn't look like he was trying to hide the connection, here's the catch. Kate told the cops that she had never been to Robert's house. Every time she asked him why, he said it was because his room was messy and he shared it with someone else. He even called Jasmine his tenant instead of his lover. Even though everything was very strange, the cops couldn't just assume the worst. They thought he might have something to do with Jasmine and Aaliyah's disappearance, but they didn't have enough evidence to connect him directly to it. Robert was released, but only after he agreed to a few terms. They took away his car and phone and got a warrant to search his home. So they could look into it. He couldn't go home until they were done. The cops looked through everything over the next few days. When they checked Robert's phone, they saw that he had removed about 30 pictures of Jasmine and Aaliyah on April 23rd, the day they were reported missing. He had also deleted some pictures of a gun. To make things even worse, his phone's location data showed that he was near Bragg Creek when Jasmine and Aaliyah disappeared. Remember that he said they went there for a lunch, but the time seemed very off. The cops thought it was important to check out this creek area. They looked around and found a homemade fire pit that looked like it had just been used, but not for making hot dogs or s'mores. They found some really scary things when they looked around: a car seatbelt, baby shoes, nappies, pieces of children's books, and a Jungle Book DVD. Scent dogs were brought in, and they sniffed out an accelerant that was used to start the fire. That was not the end of the probe. At a nearby petrol station, CCTV video caught Robert filling up his car and a petrol can. He then washed his car. What they found in his house, though, was even stranger. 2 long sticks had been put up to block the front door, and as we already said, cellophane was covering the window. A number of spots on the walls had also been cleaned and sanded down. They found more strange things inside, like a plastic hammer full of sand and boxes of blue moving blankets. They also found a gun, safe full of guns and ammunition boxes. But what stood out the most was a gun part that was partly melted, an infant toy, Jasmine's prescription bottles, and even her torn passport in his trash can. Not only that, but there was something even stranger. They found raw bacon strips all over the house, thrown around like they were on some strange flower trail. 3 pieces of raw bacon were found, one on a dining room chair, one in the garage, and one in the room with the iron. Even stranger, there was an empty bacon package just sitting there in the kitchen. Even though strange things were found, Jasmine and Aaliyah were still nowhere to be found. Even though all of this was going on, Robert was out there giving interviews and vehemently denying that he had anything to do with their disappearance.
You were kind of the primary suspect in this homicide
I still am.
investigation. You still are. What are your thoughts about that, and what are your emotions right now? What's kind of going through your head?
It's very stressful, but I hope they will be found, and I hope we can move forward from this. No, we were friends, absolutely friends, and supported each other. I would like, obviously, for them to be found, and for me to be cleared of this.
Your relationship with Jasmine?
Good.
I mean, were you a boyfriend, girlfriend, or?
No, just good friends. Nothing alarmed me until, of course, I got arrested. So.
What happens with you right now?
I'm just gonna wait until I get a phone call to say that I can go home.
How are you feeling throughout all of this?
Traumatized, of course.
Is there anything else that you want to add to all this?
Yeah, if anyone sees her or Aaliyah, Jasmine or Aaliyah, please, let the authorities know. They said that they would be done with the property today, and that I would be able to go back to the property. But
So you're hoping to sleep there tonight?
I hope to sleep somewhere tonight. Yes.
Robert looked like he was high, or maybe drunk. He said That was how he had been living for a few days. He said everyone thought he was a thief or killer, which is why he lost his job. His friends turned against him, and he had nothing to do but drink every day. He was also very angry with the cops and said they had ruined his house and made a huge mess. Robert was sure he was not guilty and hired a lawyer because he thought he would need help to prove it. But then a close friend of his came forward secretly and said that Robert was known for acting crazy and being a loose cannon. Investigators believed this new information because it fit with other strange things they had seen him do. Another piece of the puzzle that made him look more and more suspicious. The cops still didn't have enough proof to press charges, so they chose to try something different. 2 fake police officers came up to Robert on the street near his house on May 5th. You may remember that Robert had been complaining a lot about how bad things were in his life. He said he had lost his job, his friends, and no one to turn to. This looked like exactly what the cops wanted, because Robert started to talk to them, which made it clear what they wanted. The fake cops kept telling him they thought he was innocent, which made him feel good about himself. Robert seemed to feel better after hearing this, and he was more open to talking to them. During their talk, the police officers even told Robert a lie at one point. Someone in his neighborhood had taken evidence from the scene of the crime and given it to them while the police were looking into his house, they said. They told Robert this lie in the hopes that he would trust them more. He kept giving them the runaround by suggesting that they meet up for a beer so that they could talk about destroying the proof together. Robert agreed to meet them, even though he was clearly lonely and scared. But he was still a little wary of the police, even though he seemed to be opening up. He even asked them more than once if they were really police or if they were going to trick him. The undercover officers always comforted him, making him believe they weren't police. The police officers kept up their act by telling Robert crazy stories about how they were part of a criminal gang that had done a lot of bad things before. They told Robert how bad the cops were and how much they could help him. They even helped him feel better about his fears and worries by telling him how to keep the police from suspecting him. In the end, the police asked Robert to their warehouse, which they lied about to make it sound like a secret place where they kept all their illegal weapons. For Robert, it was important to have someone to talk to, and he was ready to accept any help he could get. When the police got to the warehouse, they showed Robert a bunch of guns to make him think that the people there were dangerous crooks. Robert seemed to feel something when he saw the guns. After hearing all these stories, he started to believe the people telling him them, so he started to talk more freely. He told them that he cheated on Jasmine while they were dating. He said that was okay because that's what all guys do. This isn't always true, but it helped the police learn more about his personality and way of thinking. Robert says that Jasmine wanted to get married, but he didn't, which made things very tense between them. Robert became even more open as the talk went on. Even though he had only met these 2 cops 5 hours before, he told them everything, almost as if he was looking for approval or sympathy. He didn't give a clear answer about how he killed Jasmine and her daughter Aaliyah, but he did say some troubling things. After killing them, Robert used his phone to look for a place out of the way to dump their bodies. He picked Bragg Creek and drove there to see what was around. The next day, he said, he hid the bodies by taking them to the woods near Bragg Creek. He buried them and covered them in petrol once he got there. He didn't actually burn their bodies, but he thought that the smell of petrol would throw off the corpse dogs and keep them from finding the bodies. That wasn't the last thing Robert did to hide his tracks. He also told the police that he had made a homemade fire pit to burn Jasmine and Aaliyah's things, to make it look like Jasmine had just taken her child and run away. Things like Aaliyah's car seat and other things were set on fire. Robert went so far as to cover the bodies in mulch because he thought it would help hide the smell and make the corpse dogs even more confused. The police were most shocked by Robert's fixation on scaring the corpse dogs away. He didn't just have bacon all over his house because he liked the way it smelt. As Robert explained, he had heard that pork smells like human meat, so he thought that the bacon would keep the dogs from smelling the bodies. His plan looked like it was well thought out. It was almost like he had studied how to stay hidden. He even talked about his old car and joked that the cops would have been able to easily track him down if it had been a newer model. Since it wasn't, he felt like he was getting away with something. Even better, Robert agreed to show the police where he had hid the bodies. They drove to Bragg Creek in the middle of the night, and Robert showed them exactly where he had buried Jasmine and Aaliyah. The bodies were buried near the homemade fire pit, with dirt, sticks, and mulch on top of them. They were wrapped in blue moving blankets. Robert's decision to call the police was scary because it showed how proud he was of what he had done. Killers often go back to the places they've broken things or keep things that remind them of what they did. Robert seemed to enjoy showing off what he had done. The cops were able to arrest Robert right away with the information he gave them. Not long after, the Calgary Police Department held a press meeting, but they didn't give all the information out right away. A DNA test proved the worst. The bodies that were found belonged to Jasmine and her young daughter, Aaliyah. Jasmine had a terrible blow to the head and a bullet wound behind her left ear, which made the situation even worse. Aaliyah also took very hard hits, one on each side of her head, one to her back, and a spinal injury that ruled out the fall idea. Both deaths were ruled murders, which means that the police can now charge people with murder instead of just manslaughter. The 7th of May was a bad day for Robert because he was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. The prosecution thought about charging the person with first-degree murder for a short time, but decided they couldn't show premeditation. They were sure that second-degree murder would be their main focus, and they wanted a strong conviction. In October 2021, Robert's hearing began, and his defense took an unexpected turn. It was almost cruel of him to say that he had nothing to do with Aaliyah's death, even though he admitted to killing Jasmine. Robert's defense team painted a very scary picture of what they said took place on April 17th. While Robert picked up Aaliyah from nursery, they said that the house was empty when he got there. There was no sign of Jasmine. He and Aaliyah watched The Wiggles together, which was her favorite show. She got lost and went upstairs to the kitchen at some point. Sadly, she slipped and fell backward, hitting her head. Robert said she woke up quickly and looked fine, so they kept spending the night eating food and watching TV. Then Robert put Aaliyah to bed, smoked a cigarette outside, and got a drink for himself. She got home around 7 and went upstairs around 9 to check on Aaliyah. She found her daughter not breathing or moving in her bed, which is every mother's worst fear. Robert says that Jasmine got very angry right away and accused him of killing Aaliyah, but that charge made Robert angry. He said that when he was mad, he grabbed a hammer and hit Jasmine over and over with it until she fell down. He then got a gun and shot her to make sure she was really dead. From there, the story got worse. In a desperate move to hide his tracks, Robert wrapped Jasmine's dead body in a blue moving blanket and then cleaned up the blood with a towel. He threw the towels away, got another drink, and then went to bed. He hid their bodies and burned anything that could have linked him to the crime over the next few days. But the autopsy showed a much worse story. Aaliyah's head and spinal cord were hurt much worse than a fall could have caused. It was too clear that this wasn't an accident. Also, the medical experts said Aaliyah had injuries to her genital area, which suggests that she may have been hurt there. Because of this new information, investigators think that when Jasmine got home on April 17th, she caught Robert in the act. Robert is said to have killed Jasmine to keep her from telling anyone what she had found. He then killed Aaliyah out of fear and made up a story about her falling down the stairs by accident to hide his tracks. This idea fit with what Jasmine's family had said about Robert's behavior, that he picked up Aaliyah, cooked for her, and spent a lot of time with her in a way that made people suspicious. Many people would say that a good step-parent can show care for a child, but Robert's over-the-top interest in the child, especially after hearing what the medical examiner found, seemed like more than just normal love. The most interesting thing is that Robert never denied killing Aaliyah when he was talking to fake police. He made it look like an accident instead. Prosecutors said that Robert would have been eager to make it clear if Aaliyah's death had been truly accidental, especially since killing a kid is such a horrible thought. The defense said that Robert never said he didn't kill her in court. He stuck to the story he had started with instead. Robert was the only witness for his defense, and he told the same story. Aaliyah had fallen down the stairs, hit her head, and had died in her sleep. The part where he said he couldn't call for help because he couldn't find his phone didn't hold water, though. Robert really did have his phone with him the whole time. Plus, the police were able to read his texts, including one he sent to his lover right before the killings. Even though there were problems, Robert gave up his right to a jury hearing and let the judge decide what would happen to him. Robert was found guilty of second-degree murder in Aaliyah's death because the injuries were not an accident and would have happened anyway. The judge also said Robert's acts, like drinking and smoking after the killings instead of getting help for Aaliyah, showed he didn't feel bad about what he did. Robert was given a life sentence in jail with the chance of getting out after 22 years. Even though Jasmine's family was happy with the sentence, they knew that time would not bring Jasmine and Aaliyah back. The family was also comforted by the thought that their loved one's charity work would continue after they died. They donated $225,000 to the Calgary Women's Emergency Shelter and set up a memorial scholarship in Jasmine's honor to help other women who have been abused at home. In 2022, Robert filed an appeal of his sentence, saying that the medical examiner couldn't say for sure that Aaliyah's injuries were not caused by an accident. But the appeal was turned down, and on July 23, 2024, he was found guilty again. The families of Jasmine and Aaliyah continue to honor their memories by speaking out against domestic abuse and helping those who have been hurt by it. But a lot of people thought the term, which was only 22 years with the chance of parole, wasn't harsh enough. Some people thought it was too light of a sentence, considering how cruel and planned his killings were. There was a lot of discussion about it. That's it for today's case. If you found it compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know what you think. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.